Hilchos Maaseh Hakorbanos Perek Tisha Asar. The laws of the sacrificial procedures, chapter 19, the last chapter, the final chapter of these laws. We continue about the obligations of offering sacrifices outside of the proper place, outside of the temple. And today we're going to have some more general rules that apply to these halachas. We're also going to talk about whether non-Jews can offer sacrifices outside. Can two people do it together? Can you do part and part? What if you do part of a sacrifice inside the temple, part of it outside? So let's get into the details. Halacha Aleph, Ein hamayla b'chutz chayav. A person who offers a sacrifice is not obligated, is not liable to the punishment, ad sheyale l'roish hamizbeach sheyase b'chutz, until he copies what a sacrifice looks like. He has to go up onto an altar which he constructs outside. It has to be an altar. Mizbeach in Torah language means a structure, essentially a built. It doesn't have to be like the Mizbeach exactly. I just picked this picture just for illustration purposes. But the point is there has to be a raised structure, and you have to go onto the structure and offer the animal over there. Avalim hela al hasela al ha'even. If you just take an animal that's holy and you put it onto a rock or onto a big stone, potter, you're exempt. You haven't done anything problematic. She'ein kari karban ela al hamizbeach. The word karban, the word sacrifice, implies that it's brought on an altar. Ba'afal pishu b'chutz. Even if the altar is outside, it has to be an altar. Shenemar, as it says, vayiven noyach mizbeach. This is way before the temple was built. Noach came out of the ark after the flood. And what does he do? He builds an altar, and then he brings a sacrifice. That means that it's only called a sacrifice if you have an actual altar. And additionally, you're also only liable until you sacrifice the sacrifice with the intention that it's going to Hashem. Shenemar, because the verse that talks about the prohibition, it says, you didn't bring it to the entrance of the temple, lasois oisei laHashem. You didn't bring it to make it to God. That means, ad sheyiskaven Hashem. The whole obligation only comes, you have to have in mind to offer it for the sake of Hashem. Another rule, halacha beis. Ein chayav ela al halas davar haroi lo ishim v'la mizbeach. You're only liable for offering something which usually, if it would be in the temple, it would be fit to go to the fire and to the altar. You could go in ha'olah like a regular burnt offering. Right? What do you do with a burnt offering? You bring it on the mizbeach and you put it in the fire. Shenemar, as it says, asher yale oila oizavach. The example the Torah gives is if you bring a burnt offering or another offering, ma oila shada'uya le'ishin, the same way a burnt offering is fit to go to the fire, that's what you do with it. Af kol shada'uya le'ishim hu shechayav al ha'aseh b'chutz. So too, whatever is fit for the fire, that's what you're obligated if you bring it outside. Meaning what? Excluding what? Mikan amru. From here said the sages. First we give more examples of what's included, and then we'll give a list of what's excluded. First, more examples of what's included. Hazayrek asadam. If somebody sprinkles the blood onto the altar, that's called roi lamizbeach. So if you do this outside of the temple, you're going to be liable. Or you offer limbs of a burnt offering or the inside parts from the sacrifices that go to the altar. These are again fit for the fire, fit for the mizbeach. If you bring them outside, you're liable. Or kaimetz, or levaina, or the kmitza. That's the 3 fingers full of the flour offering that's supposed to go onto the altar. If you offer it outside, you're liable. Like taitas or incense, or minchas koyanim, or minchas nesachim, or the flour offering of a kohen, or the flour that accompanied another sacrifice. Or you pour the proper amount, 3 lug, of wine or water. That's how much they used to pour of wine or water on the mizbeach. So if you pour that amount on the altar, on the outside, chayav, you're liable. Shenemar, as it says in the same verse as before, lo yivienu lasois oisoi. You didn't bring it to the inside to do with it what was supposed to be done for Hashem. That implies whatever would be accepted on the inside, if you bring it on the outside, you're liable. But let's say things that are not fit for the fire or not fit for the mizbeach. Aval hazayrek shiare hadam b'chutz. What if you were to sprinkle the leftover blood? Right, every blood, just using this picture again, you get blood in a cup from the sacrifice, you sprinkle some of it onto the mizbeach, then there's the remainder. The remainder is called shiare hadam, leftover of the blood. That's not part of the essential mitzvah. So if you sprinkle that outside, afilu shari damim hapnimiyim, even if it's leftover of the blood that's supposed to be sprinkled inside the actual temple structure, potter, you're exempt. Why? Shazrikas shari hadam shari mitzvahim ve'enan ma'akvin. Because whatever you have to do with the leftover of the blood is called leftover of the mitzvah. It's not essential. And therefore, you don't have any problems when you bring it outside. Same thing if you were to pour wine or water, less than the requisite amount, less than 3 lug outside of the temple, potter, you're exempt, bin b'chag, bin b'shayim b'sashana, while you do it on Sukkot the rest of the year. Since less than the amount, so they're not fitting to be accepted inside. And the rule is, only if it's accepted inside, is it a problem outside. Same thing if a person offers the meat of a sin offering, guilt offering, or peace offering, which are meant to be eaten, not offered, bein shel yachid, bein shel tzibur, whether it's individual or communal peace offering, or you offer the leftover of a flour offering, or the 2 breads of Shavuos, or the show bread of every week, bachutz, and you offer it outside, potter, you're exempt, shekol elu ro'in la'achila leila ishim, because all these things are meant for eating, not for burning. And only things that are fit for the fire hold you accountable if you bring them outside. Halacha hey, what if you do a mix? Hamayles habehema kula bachutz. You offer an entire animal. You take the whole sheep and you put it on the mizbeach outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So really, the only parts that are a problem to offer outside are the parts of the sheep that would usually go on the mizbeach. So the kidneys, some of the fats, but not the whole animal. Says the Rambam, still chayav mipnei ha'emurim. You're going to be held liable because of the parts that would usually go on the mizbeach. Even though you haven't separated them out of the animal, ein besar hazevach chaitzitz, the rest of the meat of the animal is not considered to be a chatzitza, an intervening substance. It's as if you would have taken the parts on their own and offered them on the altar. But that only applies to an animal. If you take an entire flour offering, before doing the kmitza, before separating the holy part, and you just dump all the flour outside on the mizbeach, potter, you're exempt. Unlike the fats or the other parts that go onto an animal, those parts are distinct even in a full animal. You have a full sheep, yeah? But you can see where the kidneys are, you can see where the fats are. When you have a bowl of flour, there's no distinct or clear entity that's the kaimetz until you actually remove it. And therefore, if you didn't remove it and you offer it outside, no obligation. Kamtza, the chazar kumtza l'soicha, the hikriv kula b'chutz, if you did take the 3 fingers full, and then somehow that fell back in to the bowl, and then you offered it, now you've created a distinct entity. And therefore, chayav, if you offer it outside, you are liable. Halacha vav hayotzik. If somebody pours oil into the flour offering. The haboilel is somebody who mixes the flour and the oil. The hapoise is somebody who splits apart the flour offering. Some minchas were baked into like pitas or lafas, and then you have to split them in half as part of the offering. V'hameleach, or if you salt a flour offering. V'hameiniv v'hamagish, or if you wave it or you bring it to the mizbeach. V'hamesader es hashulchan, and if you set up the holy table in the temple with the lechem apanim, with the showbreads. V'hameitev es haneres, or if you prepare the lights of the menorah. V'hakoimetz v'hamekabel damim, or if you do kmitza to a flour offering, or if you receive blood in a cup from a slaughtered offering, bachutz, if you do any of these things outside of the temple, potter, you're exempt. None of these stages are the completion of a full service. The Nemar, in the verse that keeps on coming back here, it says, Asher yale oila oizavach. You're only liable if you bring a burnt offering or another offering. Maha la sheigmar avayda, af kol sheigmar avayda chayavin Allah. Just like the offering itself is the final stage of a service, and that's what holds you accountable, so to anything else. Whatever you do outside of the temple has to be a final stage of a service. Unlike pouring oil into the flour, mixing the flour and the oil, lighting the menorah and the shulchan, all that stuff, it's not a full avayda. And therefore, you don't have liability for doing it outside. Halacha zayin, para aduma, the red heifer. Now the red heifer is interesting, because the red heifer, to begin with, is offered outside. There was a special place. There was a ramp that went right from the Temple Mount all the way down to the special burning place, and they would burn the para aduma over here. So now, the question is, what happens if you burnt the para aduma somewhere else? Para aduma shesarfa chutz mimkoim sreifasa. The para aduma, you burnt it outside of the place where it's supposed to be burnt. So it's outside, not outside the temple, but outside of its regular place. V'chein soira mishtaleach. Also the goat that was sent away. We saw this yesterday, right? On Yom Kippur, the high priest would make a raffle between two goats. One would be offered as a sin offering, and the other one would be sent away out of the camp and thrown down a cliff. It was part of the atonement process for the Jewish people's sins. So, again, the soira mishtaleach is anyway going to end up outside of the temple. But you offered it also somewhere else outside. After the Kohen Gadol recited the confession over it, Potter, you're exempt. In both of these cases, you're exempt. Shenemar, because it says, when the Torah describes the prohibition, it says, you were supposed to take it, you didn't bring it to the entrance of the temple. That's the problem. The problem is that you offered it outside, and you didn't bring it to the entrance of the temple. That means, any sacrifice which anyways isn't meant to go to the entrance to the temple, you're not liable if you kept it outside. The para aduma, the soira mishtaleach, they go outside anyways. They never end up by Hashem's entrance. On the other hand, avol kadashim psulin, shahaya pisulan b'kodesh. But if you have another sacrifice that was supposed to be offered inside, and then it became disqualified while it was holy, im helaman b'chutz chayav. If you would offer them outside, you would be liable. Ketzad, what does that mean? What's an example of this? Kagan halon, animal or sacrificial meat that stayed overnight. The hayotze, or it left the temple premises. The atame, or it became ritually impure. V'shenifsal b'machsheves ha'ovet, or it became disqualified because of the wrong thoughts that the person had. Shekula nisrafin k'meshi yizbar b'hilchos psulei amugdashim, which in all these cases the meat has to get burnt, as will be explained in two more sets of laws. The laws of disqualified sacrifices. Im avar vehela mehem b'chutz chayav. If you transgressed and offer them outside, you are liable. Shenemar, same verse, lasois oisei laHashem. It was meant to be done for Hashem's sake. Kol hanasa laHashem chayavin alav ve'elu nasu laHashem. Whatever was originally intended to be offered to Hashem, you're obligated, and this was no different. These sacrifices, if not for the disqualifying factor, they would have been offered to Hashem. On the other hand, the para aduma and the soira mishtaleach were never meant to be offered in front of Hashem at this place. Halacha ches. Kol davar shechayavin ala la'aseh b'chutz. Knowing all the information that we have, and the full list of things that you're obligated for offering them outside, you never have to offer the entire thing. Kevan shehela mimenu kezayis b'chutz chayav. Just offering an olive-sized portion of that thing makes you liable. Bein shehela b'fnim tchila v'shir mimenu kezayis v'helo b'chutz. And this applies whether you brought everything properly on the mizbeach and you left over one olive-sized portion, which you offered outside. Bein shehiniach hakol b'fnim v'lakach mimenu kezayis v'helo b'chutz. Or you didn't offer it inside, you just left it inside and you grabbed an olive-sized portion of it and you walked outside and you offered it. In both cases, you're liable. Avolim chasar oisei davar hakarev kol shuhu b'fnim. But if, while it was still inside, some of it disappeared, you lost some of the original content or quantity, v'hela she'irisei b'chutz, and you simply took the rest and went outside, potter, then you're exempt. Because it has to be fully inside. In other words, you have to have the whole quantity from which you took a kazayas. But if part of the quantity left, or disappeared, or was burnt, you're not liable. Keita, what does that mean? Hakaymetzei alevayna. Yeah, the kmitza, the 3 fingers full, or the frankincense from a mincha, v'ha'imurin, or the parts of a regular sacrifice that are offered on the mizbeach, v'ha'ila o mincha nisrefes, or a burnt offering, or a flour offering meant to be burnt, v'hanusachin, or the libations, the flour, wine, and oil, shachasru miktsasam bifnim. Part of them disappeared. You lost part of the wine, part of the oil, part of the flour. V'hikriv she'irisan b'chutz, and you took the rest of the oil, rest of the flour, and you offered it outside, potter, you're exempt. Sharei nemar, because it says, again, the same verse comes back up again. Lasois oisoi. You're obligated to do it. It means the full unit. You're only liable if you have a complete quantity and you take part of it outside, but not if it's a lacking quantity. What if it didn't disappear inside? You took the whole thing outside, and outside you lost part of it, and then you offered it, the remainder. It's a suffix, it's a doubt. Therefore we can't hold you accountable, can't give you a punishment. What if you offered a limb that didn't have enough meat? It's just the way the limb came. It's a bone or or a fat. Okay, there isn't an olive-sized portion of meat. But if you count the bone is big enough. The bone is the size of an olive. Chayav, and you're liable because it's attached. And the bone counts as a limb as much as meat does. If you required the salt that's on it to count towards the size, that's a doubt, and we can't hold you accountable. We cannot give you lashes for that. The burnt offering, together with its inside parts, it holds you liable. They combine to a kazayas. Some commentaries even say that emureha refers to another sacrifices. You have a burnt offering meat and a peace offering's insides. They could even combine. Halacha Yud Aleph, hela v'chazar v'hela. What if you offered a little bit on the mizbeach outside, and then you offered some more? So, just using this mizbeach as an example, you took one piece of meat up, then you went down, took another piece of meat up. Chayav al kol aver ve'aver. You're liable separately for each limb, because each time was a new offering. Zarak hadam v'hela ha'evarim. If you both sprinkled the blood and offered the limbs, chayav shtayim, you're also liable twice. Sharei chilek hakosov ben ma'ila lo'isa. Because Torah differentiated between offering and just doing the actual sacrificial procedure. How do we know this? Because there's two verses. Shari Nemar, it says in one verse, Asher yale oila. He offers. The word yale is key. He offers an oila. The Nemar, and in the other verse it says, la soy soy soy, to do it. Which means that both for aliyah and for doing, sprinkling the blood and offering the limbs, you hold two liabilities. Hela ever chaser pater. If you brought up a limb that was lacking, that's exempt. Shenemar la soy oisay, ala shalim muchayev, same thing. Only for a complete limb, you're obligated. Here we're talking about when the limb was actually lacking a piece. Before, it was talking about a limb that was just not big enough, or you needed the bone to count towards the kazayas. But here, if it's, let's say, a bone got chopped in half, and you're bringing half a bone, that's no good. Or that's no problem, no liability. Halacha Yud Beis, Shnayim sheshachatu p'turin. As we said yesterday, if two people slaughter a sacrifice outside the temple, they're exempt. However, Shnayim she'achazu be'ever v'he'elu b'chutz chayavin. If two people partner together to bring up a piece of meat onto an altar outside the temple, they're obligated, they're liable. Shenemar, because it says in the verse, a little bit of an extra word, ish ish. Ish ish in Hebrew means every man. But literally it means man and man, two men. Afilu ish v'ish shehelu chayavin. From here we learn even a partnership. Yeah, literally it means everybody, but in Torah homiletical context, it means even if you have one man and another man, and they come together, and they offer an offering, chayavin, they're going to be liable. Even two together. This verse only says ish ish by yale, by offering, not by yishchat, not by slaughtering. By slaughtering, only one person. By offering could even be two. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hazirek miktsas matanes b'chutz chayav. Okay, so every sacrifice has different amounts of time that has to be sprinkled. Right, a regular burnt offering is just twice on two opposite corners. Sin offering is on all four corners. So what if you do only part of the applications outside? Chayav, you're still liable. Because you did any form of zrika, holds you liable. Hamekabel dam chatas b'kais echad. What if you receive the blood of a sin offering in one cup? Nasan mimenu b'chutz, v'chazar v'nasan bifnim. And you first put some on an altar outside the temple, then you went inside and put it on the proper mizbeach. Chayav al hanitan b'chutz, shahare kulei roi likarev bifnim. You're obligated, you're liable for what you put first on the outside, because the whole blood could have gone into the inside of the mizbeach. V'im nasan mimenu bifnim, v'chazar v'nasan b'chutz, pater. But the opposite way, if you would first apply it properly to the mizbeach, and then take out the rest outside, you'd be exempt mipnei shehein shirayim, because they're left over, and they are of no consequence. Aval in kibel bishnei kaises, but if you receive the blood in two cups, bein shanasan shnein b'chutz, or echad b'chutz ve'echad bifnim, or echad bifnim ve'echad b'chutz, whether you applied both of them outside, or one outside, one inside, or one inside, one outside, harei chayav, you are liable. Because in both cases, both cups of blood were technically able to be brought inside. And they don't cancel each other out. And therefore, you're liable for each one separately. Halacha Yudal Kaimetz Valavena Shal Mincha. The flour and the frankincense of a flour offering. Shehikriv Echad Man B'chutz. If you offer only one of them outside, every flour offering you have to offer both, the kaimetz and the levina. Here you only did part of it. You did one inside, one outside, chayav, you're still liable. They're considered distinct for these laws. We'll see more about this in the next set of laws, but the showbread, every Shabbos, was offered together with 2 spoons of frankincense. After davening on Shabbos, we usually say that little paragraph. And over there it says, you offer 2 spoons of frankincense. So if you offered one of them outside, or one inside, one outside, again, chayav reliable, because each spoon stands on its own as a separate entity. Halacha tezvav, fascinating law. Misha shachat kadashim bizman hazeh vehelam chutz la'azara. A person, today's day and age, consecrates an animal, not supposed to, but he did. He makes an animal holy as a sacrifice, and he slaughters it, and he offers it on a mizbeach outside of the proper place where the Beis HaMikdash is. Chayav, you're liable. Technically speaking, if we knew the exact location where the mizbeach should be, it could be offered. As we saw in the laws of the Holy Temple way in the beginning of this book, nowadays, even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, you could offer sacrifices technically. Because the original sanctification, which they made, Shlomo HaMelech made, lasts forever. It made the place inherently holy. You don't have to have the structure. And in many cases, for these laws, we consider it as if there's the potential to be a mizbeach. So much so that in 1968, after the victory in 67, the Rebbe felt that people should leave Yerushalayim on the eve of Pesach, because there's an obligation to bring a Passover sacrifice, even if you're not ritually pure. And if you're in Yerushalayim and you could have brought the sacrifice, you're liable to koresh, to excision. And the Rebbe said at this point, the Jewish people had such a strong ownership over the Temple Mount that nobody would have interfered with them if they would have wanted to bring an offering. And since you could bring an offering even if there's no Beis HaMikdash, so there's some kind of obligation to do it, so you have to leave the city. Literally an application of this. A couple of years later, the Rebbe said, that's it, the government kind of lost their hold on it. But right after the war, that first year, there was literally a question about it, showing you this point, that you have to consider as though there's a potential, even today, to bring sacrifices in the proper place. And therefore, if you would have offered it outside of that proper place, you'd be held liable. Halacha Tazayin, the Rambam concludes the entire laws of Hakorbanos with the following law. Hasheichet kodshei nachrim b'chutz. If you slaughter a sacrifice that was made holy by a goy, a non-Jew consecrates a sacrifice, and you slaughter it for him, not in the Beis HaMikdash, chayav, you're liable. Also, if you offer them outside, because when a guy brings a sacrifice, many times he has in mind for Hashem, and that's fine. And you bringing it outside is doing the wrong thing with the sacrifice. But the non-Jews themselves, they can offer burnt offerings to Hashem any place. So long as they offer it on the special altar that they build for it. Not an altar for idol worship or whatever. It has to be a special bama that they built for this purpose. The osur l'sayon, the lasei shlichusan, but we cannot help them. We cannot be their agent in that stuff. Because for us as Jews, we cannot bring any offerings outside. But they can do it no problem. And also, we can teach them, we can show them the way how to offer a sacrifice properly with the intent for Hashem. More of on a spiritual level, the Rebbe says this is the last halacha. The end is like the pinnacle, the culmination of everything. The Rambam is teaching us what's the culmination of a Jewish person's service to getting close to Hashem is to also help the non-Jews. Many Jews think we have to be insulated from the world, sheltered, and only influence ourselves. But in the end of the day, we have an obligation to influence not only other Jews, but also the Goyim. Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And that's the end of it. The purpose of it all is when we can fix the world, not just inside, but also on the outside. Brich Rachamana Desayan. Blessed is Hashem who grants us assistance. Mazel tov for concluding the laws of sacrificial procedures.